as you know, Laura, I have a group of very busy moms. So we have a few that are joining us live, and we will have some that will watch the replay. But I'm super excited that you're here with us today. So I think we're just going to dive in if you're good with that.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we have Laura here today, and we're super lucky to have her here because normally, Laura, you're kind of more speaking to the corporate crowd, right?
Actually, I do a lot of one-on-ones with women business owners and women who are in male-dominated fields. And although that some of those are corporate, it ends up being mostly just the women individuals themselves. So I'll come in and train their staff after I work with them because they're like, oh, okay, my staff needs to hear this.
Right. Everyone needs to hear this. Yeah. So what I think is fascinating is that, I read a lot of business books, and I have your book that I'm reading. And although a lot of this is for the corporate crowd, so much of what I read is relevant to parenting. And that's why, I really wanted to bring you in to talk about the thing that you love to talk about, which is difficult conversations and the fact that difficult always happens. And we as parents understand that parenting is sometimes difficult, and we can't just avoid that and step away from parenting. Although I do take breaks from time to time, I kind of say, I'm done with parenting right now, but we got to step back in there. So
Yes.
I am excited to learn from you. And I was looking through your book, and even like on the front, the cover here, like you have words, and it's like trigger, fear, love, accept, rejuvenate, reactionary, all of these. I'm like, yep, I totally get this. And this is why I'm excited to talk to you. So the book
Awesome.
is Difficult Happens: How Triggers, Boundaries, and Emotions Impact You Every Day, which is so relevant to parenting.
Yes,
So
yes. And don't I know it? As I sit here, I'm fighting for Wi-Fi with the two that we have at home. I've got 5 kids all totaled, and we've got 2 here. So it's been super fun to deal with the
yes.
homeschooling.
Right, which obviously a lot of us in this group, I think pretty much all of us, a few of us actually have kids who've gone back to school, not my own, but yeah, we have a lot of online learning still in this group.
Yeah, yeah, great. Well, should I just dive in?
Yes, go for it.
Cool. So I have a presentation because I'm a really visual person.
Okay.
And I do talk a little fast. So if I go a little bit too fast, just slow me down. Just say, hey, I got a question or anything. And I'm going to ask you guys some questions. So go ahead and throw your answers in the chat if you're able to. And let's see if I'm.
And Laura, are you okay if people do want to ask questions that they unmute themselves and ask?
Absolutely. Because
Okay.
if I cover it later, I'll just let you know, hey, we're going to get to
Okay.
that slide, or I'll just dive in because I love a more interactive, you know.
Right.
Okay, so it says host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay, so let me go in. I'm going to make you co-host
Okay.
or
I'm not
host,
sure if we have
actually.
to restart afterwards. This Zoom, you know.
Oh, let's see if it does that or not. Sometimes it does.
You are the captain now. Okay,
All
cool.
right,
Share
there
my
we go.
screen. All right, let's make sure that y'all can see this. Can y'all see my Google Slides?
Yes.
Sweet. All right, and can you guys see everything, or can you see can you see you?
I can still see me, and that's just how people set up their own thing. If they want to see the speakers, I can see you for sure. And then I can see the slide is all, it's not in presentation view, so I can see the little slides on the left, just so you know.
Okay, cool. If I do presentation mode, I can't see you guys. So if it's not bugging you
Okay.
guys, I'm going to leave it just like this.
All right.
Okay, cool. So, difficult conversations, they can be anything. And really, what makes a difficult conversation? You may love to talk about politics, while your husband does not. So that may be a difficult conversation. Some people are more comfortable talking about, sex and birth control and misogyny and all the things that we have to deal with that are difficult. But just because they're difficult doesn't mean that they have to be hard. And with just a couple of key understandings, you can turn those difficult conversations into really productive conversations that are not quite as triggering for you. So I did some research. There's this new WHO study that's been out there. And they talk about how I had read 98%. I put in 89% because I wasn't sure if that was a typo or not, but 89% of people are uncomfortable with conflict or uncomfortable with difficult conversations, which doesn't surprise me, especially women. Women are indoctrinated in different ways, right? And some things are kosher to talk about, some things are not. I had immediately thought, like, who are these 12% that are answering, oh, heck yeah, I love conflict. I really want to talk about conflict. They're the kind of unicorns. That's the big little chubby unicorn that I have there.
Laura, do you know, is this statistic for the US or for the world, or do you
So
know
it's WHO. So I believe it's a world.
Okay.
So it's
Interesting.
worldwide.
Huh.
Yeah. It's interesting because some people, when you say, are you okay having difficult conversations, they'll answer one way. And then, are you okay with conflict? They'll answer a different way. Because a difficult conversation does not have to escalate to a conflict, but there are many people who correlate them as being the same, one and the same, right?
Right. And I know for our young girls, this is something I try to teach them, how to have conversations that are difficult, and, maybe there's a conflict happening, because if they don't know this skill, that's where the mean girl behavior develops, because they can't go and talk to this person directly. So they talk to 10, 20 other people about the issue at hand instead of to that person. So this is really very relevant to us as adults, but also to our young girls.
Well, yeah, and then you end up triangulating. So that
Mhm.
once you bring in that third person, it becomes a cycle. I'm going to actually talk about the cycle of a conflict, and I call it the conflict loop, because if you don't break that loop, well, then the conflict just continues and it escalates, and it almost always ends up in in tears,
Mhm.
And
Yes.
women in general, uh, I know for myself, when I get frustrated and I'm trying to communicate and I'm flustered, sometimes I will cry. And it's like, nope, that's not the emotion that I have. That's a mask emotion, but that is what's stepping in because we're not used to, having these difficult conversations. And kids and, girls are hormonal, and I'm hitting the other end now. So I'm also hormonal, but for different reasons. And the impact of conflict, it really does impact you physically. Our bodies keep the score of every single emotion. And when you ruminate on something, your body doesn't know that you're not experiencing it, right? So you have the impact of difficult conversations, not only physically, but emotionally. And financially, because if you spend time ruminating on it, or if it's disrupting your work pattern, then it's basically robbing you of time, energy, and money. I put
And
this
one
meme up.
thing that moms and daughters can do that's quite unhealthy is co-ruminating. So that's it.
Yeah.
When the daughter's experiencing something, the mom steps in, kind of experiences it with her, and talks about it like for a couple of weeks. And so, like you're saying, it's like they are just escalating those emotions and what's going on.
Right. And you don't want to slip into the parentification, right? Where you share too much in the commiseration so that
Mhm.
you don't give them an example of how to navigate it. And instead, you just stay stuck in it. And then the child sort of feels like they have to be alpha, just like, with most animals,
Right.
and they can fall into that parentification role, which is, can damage your relationship. And what we think it's going to be is not often what it's going to be. I love this meme, and I follow Lawyer Logic because I used to be in the courts. And so I worked with a lot of people, and they're so funny. It's like what you think online schooling is going to be like, or what you think the conversation that you're going to have with your daughter or your son, or, how you think it's going to go and how it really goes are not often, the same. I put my notes up here. And in uncertain times, well, uncertainty in general, it triggers fear. We are animals of habit. We need to be able to predict what's going to happen in order to feel safe, in order to, I mean, that's how we've survived for so long, not being huge, pterodactyls or something. Humans use their brain in order to predict the outcome and therefore to act accordingly. And when you add in uncertainty, and what is more uncertain than what we're going through right now? Take all of that out of the equation. Take the elections and the COVID and all of that, and you just deal with hormones and the change that you just go through in life. That's uncertainty enough to trigger fear. And fear is such a powerful, powerful emotion that it can often be a mask for other emotions. What I mean by that is if you're feeling sadness, sometimes anger will step in, or fear will step in, or shame, one of those really strong, powerful emotions to protect you from other emotions. So, okay, I'm going off on a tangent. I don't mean to go down this road, but it's
I'm
important.
following you completely on this. Yeah. And parents, when we get overwhelmed, like this year has done for us, and
Yeah.
we lead oftentimes with anger. And then at the end of the day, we're like, why did I react like that? Why did I say that? And this is why.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And we can be fearful. I mean, I know I had twins. And so when I brought my twins home, my oldest one was not even 2 yet. And so I was terrified. And so I walked around and pretty stressed out, but angry. And I remember my nephew saying to my sister, "Are we going to the angry ants or the other ants?" And it was like, oh shit, I'm the angry ant. Oh
Oh
no.
gosh.
But that was how I could control, because I felt so out of control at the time. That was a bell that was rung that could not be unrung after that. It's like, oh, time to do some personal development there.
Right.
And what we all really want is normalcy. We want predictability. We want less stress, and we want harmony. And I put this word balance in there because I think that balance is BS. I think we should take that word out. But if it means something specific to you, or if it resonates with you in some way, really it's harmony. And in harmony, there's ebbs and flows, sort of like Newton's cradle. We're not meant to always be in total sync or always be happy. That's just not reality. We need the ebbs and flows in our life, but we want harmony. And along with that harmony, it's that predictability. But in order to get that, you need to have awareness around what's really going on. And so today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about triggers. Some people know them as buttons or hooks, what hooks you in or triggers you. And this is a small t trigger, even though I spelled it with a capital T. It's not a trauma trigger, which is a very different thing, but they act similar. We're also going to talk about the conflict loop, what's going on during a conflict. And this can be a conflict in your own mind or an actual conflict with another person. And we're also going to talk about your own conflict personality type. Now, I don't mean your personality type. Are you an extrovert, an introvert? What is your Enneagram or any of that? I'm talking about when your back is up against the wall, when you're triggered, what do you go to? What is your conflict personality type? And I'll get into what the heck that means. And then any questions that y'all have. So, yay. So why listen to me? What do I got to say? Sure, I wrote the book on Difficult Happens because I was raised a free-range child in Seattle in the 70s and had the opportunity for a lot of difficult scenarios to enter into my life. But I was also a child advocate in high conflict court situations. So I was able to see certain habits and patterns play out over and over again. And being the communication nerd that I am, I found it fascinating. I mean, just fascinating to watch a couple who's getting a divorce, sitting across the table from each other, yelling at each other, just so full of rage, saying the exact same thing, but being completely unable to hear each other because they were stuck in their conflict loop and they were so triggered. I was also an investigative journalist at KCTS 9. If y'all are Seattleites, the PBS station back when investigative journalism was real. And I was a private investigator where we worked on a lot of lonely heart cases and missing persons. And basically everybody that I worked with in my entire career has come to me in a heightened emotional state. And when you're in a heightened emotional state, you're not your true self when you're on vacation in Hawaii, right? You're stressed out. Your conflict personality type has been triggered and you react and act in different ways when you're in that heightened state. I also have a podcast called Difficult Happens, Effective Communication I have changed it to You because, hey man, we all need effective communication. And I have over 170 shows all about manipulation, boundaries, passive aggressive behavior, yada, yada. And I do all kinds of trainings on toxic tactics in general, because when you're in a heightened emotional state, oftentimes manipulators will use that to keep you off kilter. But I digress. When you think about your day, like what you do every day, and that's, COVID times or pre-COVID times, we all have habits and patterns that we fall into. We brush our teeth the same way. We have the same thing for breakfast. We drive the same way to office if we still go to an office. We go to the same coffee shop. I mean, we just do. We love habits and patterns, right? And some of the habits, I know that I bought BritBox, I bought Acorn, I've got Netflix, I got Hulu, I got HBO Plus now. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of TV I've been diving into. But sometimes you fall into these habits and they really are mindless and they're really hard to change. And some of them we think of as good, like hitting the gym or going for a run or going for a hike or meditating or, whatever you think of as a good habit. And others, like I joke about, Netflixing and Acorn and BritBox and all that, you think of them as bad or not good. You don't want to fall into them or do too much of them. But habits are just neutral. They're not good or bad. They are something habitual that you end up doing. We do the exact same thing in the way that we communicate with one another. I know when my kids were young, like I say, I have twins and I've got the older three. I now have I get like frozen. I have a 26, 24, two 24s, a 16 and a 14-year-old. But the twins are a boy girl twin. And the girls are like me. They're so didactic. They're extroverts. They talk all the time, And my son is extremely introverted. And I would fall into a pattern and a habit in the way that I communicated, in that because he was so introverted, I didn't draw him out as much. And it took a concerted effort to say, okay, girls, be quiet. Lucas is going to answer now, to change the pattern, the habit of how I communicated. And actually what made me do that was, this is kind of embarrassing, but I was asking Lucas a question and the girls were, how it gets in the household full of a whole bunch of extroverts. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And Lucas just went, I can't think or talk because there's nothing but you guys talking all the time. And I was like, totally valid. We are. And we talk so fast and we talk loud. It's like, oh, time to change some habits, time to change some patterns. And it's easy to fall into that thought of like, you know what, it's going to change later. It's the vid, it's the election, it's the age they're at. It's just the teen years, or it's external factors, like just your job. I'm busy right now. I'll get more time later. But the fact of the matter is that it takes awareness and a habit that you recognize to change. There's got to be a triggered reaction to say, oh, this, and hopefully it's not your Lucas moment where he calls you out for ignoring him. But difficult stuff, it takes time and energy and a plan. And it also takes acceptance with failure because, there will be some bumps along the way. And when you're dealing with emotions and your kids and yourself, sometimes it can be hard to apologize for like, hey, can we get a redo? I didn't like the way that conversation went. It takes awareness and it takes a little bit of, balls, if you don't mind my saying. So let's take a look at the conflict loop or what's really going on. This is internally and externally. Now, don't worry about this graphic and all the words and everything, because I gave Sherry a copy of a lot of the concepts that we're talking about, just to make sure that you'll have it for later. So you're not thinking, oh my God, I got to write this all down. I don't know what all this is. But this is basically—
I'll post it in the Facebook group for everybody.
Perfect. And this is what the conflict loop looks like. This is happening all the time. And the reason that I put the little arrows as best I could in Google Slides is that it goes around and around and around until it is stopped. And what's happening is, let's say you've got a difficult conversation that you got to have with your kids. You are automatically assuming something. You're assuming what's going to happen, how it's going to go, how you're going to start, how they're going to react. This is all happening behind, because remember, we like to predict. And then you're going into a judgment. You're going into a judgment about how your kid's going to react or how you're going to react, and whether that's good or bad, whether that's going to be a positive or a negative. And now when it comes to triggered reactions, that's where the party is. That's where it's all happening. That's where, that's what it's really all about. The next thing that happens is you have expectations. Okay, what's, these assumptions, these judgments, these expectations, the trigger can come anywhere along that, and you can switch those. You can first have an expectation and then an assumption or a judgment. It just depends on, because they're kind of all happening at the same time, and it depends on your interaction with this person, what's happened previous, what's happened in your lexicon of lenses that you look through, your childhood, your family of origin, all that good stuff that we learn about as we grow and get older and work on personal development. So how many of you have heard of triggers or hooks or buttons, and which one resonates the most with you?
Hi, this is Amy. I'm
Hi, Amy.
actually totally, I've heard of all of those. As a matter of fact, triggers, hook, push buttons. I can relate from last night. I totally lost my shit, and I totally understand all of those things, and I know how they're all kind of connected and they seem similar, but I'm sure you're going to tell us that they're different.
Amy, can you share like what was the trigger from last night?
I don't know. Oh God, this same thing. It's not really embarrassing, but I hope it's relatable. So there is something that my tween is watching right now, and I guess there's something called the Karen personality, and something that's like, I want to speak to the manager, and she was doing that over and over. And today is her first day back in person school, so there was so much we had to do to prepare, and I was absolutely exhausted from just life yesterday.
Right.
And it was like 9 p.m. and she was doing this over and over. And I'm like, can you please stop? This is obnoxious. I need you to stop. Like, and I told her, I said, I'm going to lose my shit. I need you to listen to me, please. And of course she's like, look what I can make my mom do. Right.
Yeah.
So it was something so stupid, icing on the cake. And she did all the trigger. She knew it. She hooked me and she pushed those buttons over and over.
Oh yeah. Shanna says she gets that. Been there too.
Oh
yeah. And no one knows you like your kids.
Right.
They know just what to say. One of the my kids are older now, and every once in a while they fall back into that, you know how kids get. But my daughter likes to turn into the parent and, get more, you know what, Mom, I really don't have time to deal with your emotions right now. And it's like, it's so clearly, for me, it's like, obviously she's stressed out. She's really anxious. And what she really means is I'm having a lot of emotions and I need to go feel them. And so I don't fall for it anymore. But boy, when she was a tween, a little bit of a puppeteering going on. And also she's brilliant too. So that kind of sucks. And on one side, you're like, well, it's great that she's brilliant. But on the other side, damn, she got my number again.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so when it comes to triggers and hooks and buttons, what I have found is it's your generation. My mom just left. She was here visiting for a week and she is 77 and she is of the generation. She has a master's in counseling and she has a PhD in anthropology. So her whole thing is discourse and words and diving deeper into the culture of the self and all that kind of stuff. But she hates the word triggers. It triggers her. And she kept trying to get me to change this damn slide to just hooks. And she's like, why don't you just call everything hooks? And I'm like, well, that resonates with you, Mom, but that's hooks. That doesn't resonate with me. And so I put each one in because some people think of triggers just as a trauma trigger, which it was 10 years ago. But as things happen, it becomes part of the common vernacular, sort of like people will say narcissist, when what they really mean is narcissistic traits, because there's something called narcissistic personality disorder, which is one thing. And then there are narcissistic behavioral patterns, which are a different thing. And it just kind of, the word changes and, it ends up meaning something different. And you can shush me. I need to check the time because I can go on and on. And I don't
23.
Okay, thank you. So interesting. It's thank you for sharing with me what resonates with you, which word. So wouldn't it be awesome if we had we could just push a button and be like, these are her triggers or his triggers, and these are the conflict personality types. Okay, I now have a roadmap for how I'm going to interact with this person. Well, I'm going to go through what the triggers are, the main triggers, and what the conflict personality types are, and you will have that roadmap. So you'll know, you can navigate different ways that you're going to interact, especially with the Karen situation. And your daughter's going on and on. And if you guys have another example that like really, you're like, oh, well, what about this for this situation? Just let me know and we can problem solve it together. So like I said, trigger is where the action is. It is where conflict is born. Because if you were not tired and you were not over the voice, going on over and over again, you wouldn't have been triggered. And that is an emotional trigger that happens because you're like, this voice is triggering an emotion in me. So the assumptions, the judgments, and the expectations are where the trigger happens, and it leads to the reaction or the outcome. Have you ever heard that, like I just said, back up against the wall, right? Or shouldering a burden or pain in the neck. That guy makes me sick to my stomach. Ooh, my blood runs cold whenever I see him. Those idioms are all there because every trigger impacts us physically. And we all know these feelings. These are very similar feelings. When you say you're shouldering a burden, it's because you do. You get tense in the neck when you've just got too much on your plate. Our body keeps the score of every single emotion that we have, and it's the key. So if you find yourself before you react tensing, or your stomach, you're holding your jaw tight, that is a cue, a key to you that you have been triggered in some way. And you can back up and stop the reaction that may or may not come next. The 4 types of triggers that we all have are emotional, the feelings, physical, the environment, verbal, the words themselves, and the content, which is the Mac Daddy of all triggers. And I want to go through each one of these really quickly if you all don't mind. The first one is emotions. Now, there was someone who did, I forget if it was MIT or Caltech or one of the universities, did a study on where these different emotions show up in your body. And when you look at anger, I mean, it's just right there in the heart center, and it's right in your face, and you're ready to go. I think it's interesting that the fingertips run freezing cold, but it impacts you physically, and the way that you are physically is the way that you're going to react from. I had a woman I worked with, very powerful CEO. She worked in the aerospace industry. And she was an incredible woman, but she was in a male-dominated field, and everybody she worked with was men. And she was fine with anger. She was just absolutely fine with anger. But as we were working together, we uncovered that what was actually happening in this one scenario was that she was sad, but she was unable to feel sadness in a way because it was not serving her entire life. So anger stepped in. And so she kept pushing sadness down. That is an example of an emotion that triggers, meaning the moment that she had that sadness, it triggered her to react in such a way that she brought in a more powerful emotion to shove that one away. The next one is...
let me say something to that, because the reason we go to the powerful emotion is for that exact reason. It empowers us more. We think it does anyway. So that's why it seems less weak, especially if you're talking about a male-dominated field, right? But even with our kids, it feels like, if we're like sad, we lose that strength, and when we're relating with our kids. So not necessarily true, but that's kind of how we see it.
Well, yeah, and anger is the great protector. I mean, I find myself, I know that for a trigger for me, I start getting really angry. I'm trying to get a slide deck together. I've got a presentation, or I've got a virtual retreat coming up, and it's like, I'm all angry. And it's not anger, it's fear. What if no one comes to my party? What if no one likes my presentation? It's like,
Right.
Okay, that anger is a mask emotion. I need to deal with whatever else is coming on deck. And when it comes to kids, we do feel like we can't show emotion, but that's the greatest gift we can give them, is to show them, here's an emotion I'm feeling, here's how I'm walking through it, and here's how I'm handling it, because you can't stuff it down and you can't walk around it. So it's a gift to mirror for them, to show them how to work, how to deal with that emotion. So when it comes to environment and this anxiety, look at anxiety, that is almost completely heart center, and there is nothing going on in the brain. Everything is just right here. When it comes to an environment, for me, I can't deal with an office with halogen lights. It goes back to some of my first jobs, but I can't deal with it at all. Years ago, my sister and I both took, my sister Megan, my oldest sister, took my dad's intro to geology class. We both went to Seattle University, and my dad was a professor there. And we both took his class because we thought, it'd be totally fun. And we took it together. And my dad loved having us in there, and it wasn't against the rules at that time. But we, at the first couple of days of school, we got our syllabus and we're reading through it. And it's like, all right, oral final, and we've got to go here, field trip here, no big deal. My sister Megan sees oral final, and she's like, what? What do you mean? She hates speaking in public. She was triggered right away. She stressed about that oral final all semester long. I mean, she would practice in the mirror at home. We only had one mirror growing up. It was above the sink. And so she would practice in there. And it drove me crazy because I'm like, get out of the bathroom. I got to use the bathroom. And she'd be practicing this speech that she would give. Well, finally, on the day of, my dad's like, why don't you just go first? Because, you're really stressed out about it. And she goes, okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and go. And she goes up to the front of the room and she turns around and she says, good morning. and passes out. And she just could not do it. She was triggered from the first day she got that syllabus, and she emotionally suffered the entire time as if it was happening every single day. Some people are perfectly fine giving an oral final. I could care less. My poor dad was tormented. He actually changed the rules after that. He said, you can give it in front of the class or you can give it to me in private, either way. But that's an example of an environment that can trigger you. The next one is topics. And like I say, this is the content. This is the Mac Daddy. This is what you're talking about. Whenever I have to do my quarterly taxes and I got to get everything together for the county and the state and my accountant, that is something that triggers me. I can't stand dealing with the finances. Some people don't want to talk about sex. They don't want to talk about politics. There are topics that trigger us to a reaction. Look at shame. Don't you find that interesting? The eyes on shame.
That is interesting. And I would like to ask in the chat box if you want to share like what topics are triggering for you. I'd love to hear that. Go ahead, Laura.
Excellent. I was trying to find the chat box so I could see. Just let me know when they do
I'll let
answer.
you know. Yeah.
So here they are, the emotional, physical, verbal, and content. And again, like I say, I gave Sherry a workbook so that you'll have all of this in there. But I was working with a guy named Jay, and he's a financial planner, and he's very literal. I love this graphic, by the way. This is these guys sell all kinds of great sweatshirts like, astronaut, male astronaut, just the silly things that we say. Anyway, doctor, male doctor. Well, he came to me, Jay did, and he was like, can you help me talk about money with women? I don't know how to talk to women about money. And of course I can help him with this, but it really wasn't about talking to women about money. It was talking to individuals where the topic of finances or money in general or saving for the future or whatever was very triggering to them. And as we worked together and we came up with a blueprint on, how he interacts, what he gets triggered by, what he can do to talk to people who may be triggered by this content in particular, and how to pre-frame and get everything set up and how to follow up so that you can lessen the triggered reaction and actually shift. Once you break that trigger cycle, then you're no longer triggered by that. It's like a bell that's been rung, but it can't be unrung. Now, I always throw kittens in here at this point, because when we go through those graphs of where people hold emotions and shame and anxiety and triggers, and everybody seems to tense up. Now, I'm on Zoom and the only person I can see is Sherry, but I'm just going to guess that maybe there might have been some tension, because every time I do any kind of workshop or work one-on-one with people, I've noticed that they hold their body. So kittens for you.
Hey, Laura, this is Amy again. I just wanted to say I was feeling what you just mentioned, going through all that, and I was starting to feel kind of weird, and it was bringing up some things that are on my mind. And then when you showed the kittens, I did feel instant happiness. So thanks.
Oh, good. Good. One time I was getting ready to go and do a presentation for the Washington Realtors Association. And I was down in Portland visiting my daughter, Grace, and I was doing the slideshow, and she got all irritated that it was kittens. And so she started airdropping pictures of her dogs to me. Just, make it puppies, Mom. What's wrong with that? It's true. She's got cute dogs. But I do find, just stopping, because just a simple breath, it really does just relax everything. And this is what you can do whenever you feel like you've been triggered, or whenever you find yourself starting to tense up. I know for me, it's my jaw and my shoulders. My shoulders start to rise, and I have to consciously take a breath. Take a breath. So if you wouldn't mind, anyone here, if you've taken assessments, any kind of personality test, I'm talking like your Myers-Briggs, your Enneagrams, your Colby's, your DISC, your StrengthsFinders. If you've taken any of those, would you mind putting it in the chat or just letting me know what one really resonated with you, or what personality assessments kind of opened up your eyes to a different way of thinking? Yeah, Myers-Briggs is a huge one. INFJ. ENFP. That was the first one that kind of opened my eyes to assessments in general. On my website,
I'm actually a P. Sorry, I put J. I'm not a J. I wish I was a J.
Yeah, I need more J in me. I joke because my husband's a J.
What are
Sorry.
you guys talking about? Which personality test is that?
That's Myers-Briggs.
Oh, it is
Mhm.
with the letters. Man, I got to take mine again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
extrovert, intuitive, thinking, is it? And then whether you are a uh, perf for
Perfect.
P, it's more a little scattered is what I think of it, and J
Okay,
is a little more organized, but I can't remember what the acronym stands for.
I'll
I'll
look
put in the Facebook group, I'll put a link to a personality assessment that I love. And what's really great about it is it actually has a section about how it affects parenting. So I'll make sure I put that in the Facebook group. So Amy, you can brush up on that, and anybody else can do that as well if you're
Thank
interested.
you.
Yeah. Well, one that really changed my world was the Colby. I had never heard of it before, but I recently took it. So I ended up doing a whole series on my podcast about all the different assessments and what the good and the bad and all that kind of stuff, what you can take from them are. So, and that's just on my website. You can just click the podcast and there's a drop down all about assessments if you're interested in that nonsense. So I was talking about, your conflict personality type, and basically you can do a self-assessment on your personality type, your conflict personality type, and maybe your kids, like when you're interacting with them. And remember, sometimes you change and grow as well. So as you do more personal development, and personal development is the muscle that does all of the heavy lifting for all other growth and development, I feel. That's my personal opinion. The insights. Yep, I like that one. And the how to fascinate, I think, is another one. I could nerd out on assessments all day. So the first type of conflict personality type is the perfectionist. Now, when it comes to the conflict personality type, we have active presentations and passive presentations. What I mean by that is a perfectionist will be a perfectionist internally when it's more passive, and they want control. They have very high expectations, not only of themselves, but of other people. When it jumps the shark, or when it invades other people's boundaries, it is in the activated role, and that's as a controller. So a perfectionist is a controller as well, but that's when they're stepping over the net, kind of getting into your, like when you're trying to just think of parenting, right? Use this example with your kids, and their behavior is not what you want it to be. And maybe your perfectionism kicks in and you want to control the outcome. Unfortunately, what happens oftentimes is we do overstep people's boundaries and we rob them of natural consequences. Natural consequences are extremely painful for parents to watch their kids go through, but they are critical for their own personal growth. The second type is the pleaser. Now, we call this person the pleaser fixer, because what'll happen is when it is passive, they try to please everything, people. They will try to guess what would make other people happy. They just want to, make sure that everything is smooth and people are happy and there's no conflict. When it goes into fixing mode, that's when they step over the net and they try to fix problems that don't belong to them. They try to fix situations that maybe the other person doesn't want you to fix, right? And again, it robs them of natural consequences and it oversteps boundaries.
We've talked a lot about this, the fixing as parents that we do, especially as moms. I'd say probably at least 75% of us in the group are fixers, if not 100%.
Yeah, I'm a pleaser. Yeah, I'm definitely a pleaser. In my non-activated life, when I'm not in conflict, I'm more of a perfectionist, but once I get triggered by any kind of conflict, I go right into pleaser mode, to be sure. And then there's the victim. We all know this person. The victim is really the most maligned of all of the conflict personality types, because who likes a victim, right? But they're suffering, I would say, the most, because they torment themselves more than we can blame them, if you know what I mean. So passively, they are a victim. They judge themselves just as harshly as other people are judging them, and even more so. And they've got a lot of shame on board. So when it's activated and it turns outward, it's blame. So when their back is up against the wall, well, no, but you, or, it's not my fault, because it's that blame shifting that happens. This is also a part of teen growth. They don't have as much empathy. And so they see the world in a very different way. And they see it as, well, it's not my fault. It's because of, and they can fall into that blame shifting. And instead of like shutting down the victim behavior or the blame shifting behavior, more walking them through the emotion itself, or like, I'll give you an example. Like my son will say, I'll say, well, what happened? Why is there a broken plate on the ground? I didn't do it. It's like, what you mean is you didn't mean to do it. It's okay. We can, from this point forward, but there's a big difference between not doing it and not meaning to do it, kind of walking them through it instead of just saying, I can see you broke it. There's no one else in here. I know it was you. That makes it about whether there was a lie or not, instead of kind of walking them through how they can navigate that. The next kind is the avoider. Now, the avoider retreats. They retreat inward in a more passive way, right? They just kind of ghost on you. They can avoid you. When they are activated and confronted, they will often play innocent. I never got that. I didn't hear that. No, I didn't say that. They can play innocent in such a way that it's hard to nail them down, right? And I want to refer back to the conflict loop here. And here's just a simplified version. We all have our kryptonite. So for a pleaser fixer, the kryptonite is the victim blamer, because we fall right into the pattern of, I'll hop over that net, I'll fix it for you. I worked with a woman who, she was so stuck in the pleaser mode that her kids would break something or make a mess. And if she told them to clean it up or whatever, and they didn't, she would just get in there and just do it. And she would give them the best piece of fish. I remember she gave this 7-year-old the best piece of fish. And I'm like, what are you doing? That is a prime cut of salmon. You're sacrificing something that doesn't need to be sacrificed. Do you think your kid knows the difference? No, not at all. And I'm going to show this to you again. This is in the handout, but again, the pleaser fixer, perfectionist controller, the innocent avoider, and the victim blamer. Now I'm going to ask all of you, what is your kryptonite? So before, you may identify what you are, but what is your kryptonite? What type of behavior it pushes your buttons the most? And you can say it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself.
I'm trying to think, like for me, I need to think about this some.
Mm-hmm. Shauna said victim. It's interesting because in different scenarios, they can, like the avoider drives me crazy. Dishonesty. Yeah, to be sure. Dishonesty is a manipulation tactic. And sometimes the perfectionist can drive me crazy because I feel judged, like, well, I should be doing it better or whatever. But there's always one, like the victim will get me to play in that dance, in that conflict loop before I even know what I'm doing. Yeah. Victim and avoider. Believe it or not, I think that there are a lot more. I think avoiding is becoming a lot more popular these days. I think there's a lot more people who find it acceptable to choose that route. Victim. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But once you know this, aren't you like, okay, now you're starting to get that Jumanji, that board that you could just tap and go, oh, I see what you're doing there. I'm not going to be a kitten playing with that ball. Forget it. I just thought I'd throw more kittens in here because, again, talking about people who trigger you, it can trigger you.
I think a great exercise, Laura, would be to really sit down and consider what your own conflict personality is, and then each of your family members or the people that you deal with a lot, and really, just be aware of it. That's the first step.
Yeah. When I do workshops, we walk through each one, and then we go back to specific scenarios that stick in your mind. And then we rewrite history, what you would have liked to have done. And that way it's in front of mind, so that the next time that you're there, you can stop yourself and go, oh, okay, you know what? I'm going to behave as if, or I'm going to try a different tack. I'm going to go a different route. So the triggers and the types, they work together. If I'm dealing with a victim blamer, it's the content that I can be triggered by, right? Well, it's more my fault, or it's my responsibility, and I'm the mom. I should help them, or the environment. Here we are again in the principal's office, and it's my fault. It belongs to me, Just think of the two working in tandem. And here's a tip: put down where it shows up in your body, because it shows up in your body. And that way you have that strengths and weaknesses, and you know when you may be triggered to act or react in a certain way. And if we have time, I have a couple of extra slides that I threw in. Do you mind if I go over these?
No, go ahead. It's only
Okay.
12:45, so we're good.
Okay, good. So some of the reactions that we often have, we can see them in other people. And I think that one of the reasons why, well, there's two reasons why I think I'm thriving in this time. One is I was raised in trauma. And so I'm like, oh, my warm, fuzzy blanket. Nice.
Welcome
This is
home.
comfortable. Right. I know the map here. I know the players. And the second reason is because I understand the reactions. So it doesn't trigger me as much, I would say. But what I see the kids reacting like, and some immature, not quite woke individuals are, I wonder if I give it away on the slide. Let's go to the first one. So do you know anyone who's just like, whatever, it's no big deal. The vid, psh, please.
My
Working
dog.
from home, no big deal. Have you guys seen this reaction before?
Oh yeah.
Can you
How about-
guess what conflict personality type that is?
Avoider.
Anybody else? It can be all of them, the pleaser, the avoider, or the victim, depending on what it is. If it's the pleaser, if the scenario is, well, I'm going to go along. I'm going to go along to get along. This is what, you know what, my friends are having us over. They're not wearing masks, but we're in the backyard. So I'm going to go along. I'm going to overstep my own boundaries because it will placate the situation. The avoider kind of lives in whatever laissez-faire. That's kind of their baseline. So if there's any situation, it's just like, whatever, it's no big deal. And they'll vacillate between this and the next one, which is the conspiracy theorist. Now, this one in particular is the perfectionist and the avoider. Why? Why do they fall prey to all of these conspiracy theories? Because they need to control the situation. They need to be the ones in the know. And in order to do that, they do this massive research and they're like, okay, I'm the one who knows. It's not really, just a regular pandemic. It's because of China or something else. It's this conspiracy theory that they want to be able to control. And it's when you see it as that, especially in your kids, when they start to kind of fall prey to certain things, beware, because I can tell you right now, white supremacists are all over our boys' feeds. I mean, we have to sit down with our son and just say, this is complete bullshit. This obviously is a bot, anyway. But think of it as, oh, you know what? They feel so out of control. They're very fearful. How can I speak to the fear and not this bullshit conspiracy theory? The next one is the shutdown. The shutdown we all go through, but the pleaser, I think, gets there first because they get emotionally exhausted because they are carrying the load of their emotions and everybody else's emotions. Because remember, they're stepping over other people's nets, taking on all of their emotions and feeling it for them. And so they will shut down earlier than most. The avoiders also will shut down early on because they're like, peace out. This is my son, Lucas. He loves this lockdown. He got to work from home. He talked his boss into working from home. He is not going back. He has his whole day mapped out. He doesn't need to go anywhere. Plays guitar in the afternoon. Loves it. The next person is the consumptor. This is the person that's watching morning news, the news at noon, the news at night. They're reading articles. They're trying to consume as much information as possible. And again, this is a way to control the situation, and it's fear-based. Now, we need to be informed. It's true, but it gets to a point where there's just no more information to be had at this juncture, right? And over-consuming, it can really get you stuck in a loop. Now, how this may play out, I think of my daughter when, the one who's now 26, she'll be 26, when she was her first boyfriend, like 14, 15 or whatever, and they broke up. And oh my God, she just over-consumed what he was doing on social media and where he was at and what her friends thought of everything. And did you read this text? And what did you think about this text? She got into this cycle of over-consuming information because she wanted to have control because she was sad. Right? She was fearful about the end of the relationship. She wasn't sure what was going to happen next. So there can be a lot of different reasons, and it also can display in different ways. Is this resonating? Does this make sense to you guys?
Oh yeah, this all makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Awesome.
It does. How do we address that fear once we acknowledge, specifically in our middle school, teenage girls and boys, how do we address once we realize it's fear? How can we address it?
You speak right to the fear. First of all, you name it and you claim it. Every emotion has a purpose, and fear is to get us back into integrity in general.
Mhm.
There's more to it. I actually have a series on my website all about the secret gifts in every emotion. But in general, each emotion has a purpose. The hardest one for kids is sadness. And sadness,
Mhm.
they call it the great river of souls, because it is so, I mean, it's hard. It's hard. But just to name it and sit in silence with it. You know, you can say, this is scary. This is, these are really hard times. There's a lot of different things that we don't know may happen. Like with my daughter, when she had the sadness, I told her, I said, this makes me really sad. This must really hurt. What does it feel like for you? What are
Mhm.
you afraid of? And just let them talk. Give them space to grieve the loss of the relationship, even though I hated that kid. Oh, got back together, by the way. They were together for 6 more years. I called him Voldemort the whole time. Parent fail, by the way, parent fail. Also, I have an ebook just for you guys. It's at 10 tips on my website, difficulthappens.com/10 tips, all about 10 tips for navigating conflict, ways that you can, different tactics that you can use when you're dealing with difficult situations. Do you guys have specific situations that you want to talk to me about now that you want to go through? Was it Stephanie? Were you the one who was talking about your daughter and how once you realize that it's fear, what you want to do? Or was that Amy?
I think, was it Shanna?
I'm just going to start naming everybody.
Yeah.
Carla?
Yeah, I think my daughter and I have talked a lot about, I mean, she's really starting to finally like open up. And I think it's a blend of fear and sadness right now that is just can be not all the time, but can be overpowering in her, like when she decides that she's like gonna, lock herself up, and I don't mean that in the negative way, but remove herself from things and go into her room and kind of take a much needed break from any type of stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing for me is like I don't have the answers either, so I don't even like I'm the fix it person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always trying to figure out a way to like make her feel better. And is the answer to let her kind of just marinate for a while in those?
Yeah, you know what I would do? I would go to her when she's not in that mood and say, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I'm really proud of you for being aware that you need to check out sometime and you need
Mhm.
downtime. Does going to your room, does that help you?" And if she's just like, "Oh, whatever," you could say, it's interesting. Different people handle it in different ways. I love to journal, or share with her whatever you like to do.
Mhm.
But it might open the door, but also let her know that you're proud that she's seeking a way to navigate the emotions,
Yeah.
and maybe even question her. You could even say, "You know what? I'm having a hard time today. I'm more stressed out. I need a different way to deal with my anxiety around what's going on. What works for you?"
Okay. Thank
Open
you.
the door. Yeah.
Yeah, and Shanna, as you mentioned, a lot of us in this group, we want to fix it. It's okay to let them have those feelings. It's not our job to fix it and to get them out of those feelings. It's our job to encourage and help them to process those feelings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I,
that just gave me chills. Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
okay, Laura, I've got a question for you. This is Amy.
Hi.
I have a daughter who's just very hypersensitive, and she also has insane anxiety. It's like anything can set her off. And one of the things, and she will actually pace and go, "I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed." And to me, that talk about a trigger, then all of a sudden I feel like I'm panicking because I'm totally out of control. And I'm just thinking of like, I don't even know what to say to this kid other than I've tried to use, I'm hearing that you're really stressed. Is there anything that I can do to help you that won't further your stress? And
Mhm.
usually that doesn't seem to do anything, but I'm just wondering if you have anything because I just feel like I'm flailing around like a fish out of water.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Amy, I really resonate with that because my older three children, they do suffer from anxiety,
Uh-huh.
and they have found skills to deal with it. I have a sister who, Shalene, the other sister, who is an MD, PhD, brilliant, really smart, but she has OCD.
Oh.
And apparently anxiety and OCD are very similar. You get cyclical in your patterns. And there are three ways that I dealt with it when my kids were at home. The first way was I'd say, hey, will you go for a walk with me? Just the act of the physical side. Remember I said triggers, sometimes just in the face, side by side walking,
Huh.
even not saying anything. That is a trigger for calm because it's the two of you against that. Just that
Huh.
physicality can really change things. The
Okay.
second thing that I used to do is I'd say, I'm going to stop you. You're complaining or you're expressing your anxiety is a real trigger for me. And I find myself emotionally reacting. So I'm going to need you to go away, go in another room and experience your anxiety or your stress by yourself. Because sometimes it was, kids they fall into patterns. And sometimes it's a small M manipulation, because they're bored. They don't like what they're feeling and they want you to change it because we've taught them that we will, or at least I taught them that I would, my kids used to all the time. I'm starving. I'm so hungry. Oh, and I would hop up and feed them. I'd get cut up a smorgasbord and cheese and crackers and apples. Oh my God. And finally, I got to the point where I was just like, I was setting them up for failure. They were teenagers. And it was like, geez, if I'm going to set them out in the world, not being able to feed themselves, I will have been a failure. Kept them off the pole, but they can't feed themselves, So finally, I started just saying, if only there were some way to get sustenance, if there was some drawer somewhere that held carbonated beverages or crackers or some kind of wheat byproduct. I mean, I went on and on and on. And it
That's
got to the point where whenever they said, I'm hungry, I'd say, if only they'd go, shut up, and they'd go get their snack.
ooh, great strategy. I'm totally going to take it from your
Yeah,
point.
I like
Yeah,
that.
and sometimes it depends on your personality type, because I use humor for a lot of things. You got to be careful that you get into snark and mockery.
Uh-huh.
Another thing that I did, and I don't want to go on and on, Sherry, so stop me if I go over too far. But another thing that I used to do is we become normalized to unacceptable behavior, especially in dysfunctional communication patterns. And so a very healthy and sometimes productive, you have to do this when they're not really in a heightened emotional state, productive way to deal with it is to say something like, I'm going to mimic you right now, not to mock you, but to show you what it looks like when you use this kind of behavior. And it was in particular with the way my daughter was talking, and it was getting to a point where it's like, you are entirely too smart to speak like that. And that that's triggering. And it just grated on me anyway. And so I would do it. And I would say, do you realize how this has become a habit or a pattern and it's become normalized? And I've noticed that you don't talk like that when you talk to your friends. And so just addressing it, but also mimicking it can sometimes help.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So what I didn't hear in there is you needed to fix it.
No. Go write in your journal how you would have fixed it.
Right.
Just keep it out there.
Right.
And also remember, one of the greatest gifts you can give is natural consequences.
Mhm.
Because, if they didn't learn how to feed themselves, I know people. My niece, actually, she went off to college and she really struggled with dressing herself. I know that sounds stupid, but her mom laid out her clothes every single day of her life, made all of her meals every single day of her life. And now she's in her 30s. She actually lives in Carnation, but she's in her 30s now. And she's like, well, I am a victim of my parents. You know, she's like, I have to unlearn all this stuff.
Aren't we all?
Oh yeah. My mom jokes that we spend the first 40 years getting completely screwed up, or the first 20 years getting completely screwed up by our parents, and the next 20 fixing it, and then you live.
Right. Exactly. Well, we are on the 1:00 hour now. So are there any last minute questions that anybody has for Laura
I agree with
before
what
we all
Natalie
jump
said
off?
in there. Yeah, Natalie said, I found sharing how I feel and what I need in a conflict helps. Yeah, I
Mhm.
totally agree. Brilliant.
Mhm. Great. Well, we will put all of these resources. I'm going to put some of the personality tests in the Facebook group. Definitely
Awesome.
the workbook that Laura made for us. Thank you for doing that. So that will give us some follow up. And we're going to be using these terms in the next month or probably the next year or so in talking about some of the conflicts that we all share with each other. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this and do a little more digging in my own relationships, but also how to continue to use this. And we'll probably pop some scenarios into the Facebook group and we'll kind of, dissect them with all of this new terminology.
I love it. Well, it was a pleasure to meet you all virtually.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everybody have a fantastic day and we will follow up later with conflict personalities. Thank you.
Good day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.